Prepare to enter Electro. Wait, no, hold on. This is the forgotten middle child of 3D Spider-Man games, living in the shadow of a genuine classic and a game that I haven't formed a new opinion on yet because I haven't played it in 10 years, but I remember it being pretty good. Without further ado, Spider-Man 2.
And now, Spider-Man 2.
Is that Black Cat saying that? Who said that? Every woman on Earth is just Jennifer Hale. Hey, he has webs on his costume this time. And the web pits. Now that's class. Looking sharp, Spidey. Alright, Stan, hit it.
Welcome, true believers. Stan Lee here to bring you yet another scintillating tale of superhero derring-do.
Neversoft took a short break from developing Tony Hawk games to drop one of the greatest superhero games of all time, refused to elaborate, and then left. And we are forever grateful for it. Then, Treyarch boosted the game's performance and visual fidelity for the Sega Dreamcast version. Then used that gameplay as a basis to begin development of Spider-Man's movie game. This left a short window of time in the year 2001 for another game based on the comic Spidey to come out, since annual releases were a little bit more reasonable back then. Activision gave the project to the small, up-and-coming developer Vicarious Visions, who previously had only worked on Game Boy games, including a handheld port of the first game and some of Neversoft's Tony Hawk stuff. But Enter Electro was their first fully 3D game ever at the time. So the deck was already a bit stacked against them to make a follow-up to something that became an instant classic. While Spider-Man 2K was part of my childhood from the very beginning, I didn't know this game existed until about 2008. I was digging through old back issues of my dad's comics, and I think it was an issue of Exiles that I opened and saw an advertisement for this game from years earlier. It blew my mind that such a thing existed without my knowledge. So I asked my dad to get me a copy on eBay so I could try it out, and the rest is history. I have fond childhood memories of playing this game for the first time while eating the boneless chicken wings from Pizza Hut and gumming up the controller with hot sauce like a stupid, stupid moron. The 90s were a weird time for Spider-Man comics. What with all the clone stuff, Identity Crisis, and then he gave up being Peter Parker and just called himself the Spider and started sleeping inside of a cocoon made of webs. I guess he forgot that stuff dissolves after an hour and he's not gonna get a full night's rest. He should have gone with today's sponsor instead, Manta Sleep. Manta Sleep creates high-quality sleeping masks that help you have more comfortable, restful sleep. Ever since I was a kid, I've struggled with going to bed before 3 a.m., especially on school nights because my brain is always really active at night. Since Manta sent me some of their sleep masks a few years ago, I've been using their product to help me get to sleep faster before an early morning commute or important work meetings. And it has genuinely worked for me. And the newest masks like Manta Cool are even better with cooling eye cups that keep your eyes moisturized at night, which helps my wife with her annual allergies. There's also the Manta Sound Mask with comfortable, adjustable earphones that can play music or white noise to lull you to sleep. They're designed with user comfort in mind, so it's easy to forget you're even wearing them. If you believe in the pro-nap movement, Manta Sleep is your best bet for getting restful sleep any time of day, and I highly recommend you check them out with my link in the description. And with my discount code SLEEPZILLA94, you get 10% off your first purchase. Now back to the video. Say the line, Bart!
I'm already at full health.
Yeah! Immediately following the events of the first game, we check back in on Spidey as he tracks a new conspiracy by his old costumed foes. The lightning bolt suspender-wearing fiend Electro has gotten wind of a device that amplifies natural electric energy in normal people, but on someone with his powers, it would make him a god.
We are close to our goal, gentlemen. The device you see before you allows an average citizen's body energy to power a city block. In my hands, that power would be limitless.
So he enlists the help of a few other supervillain thugs, and they end up pulling several heists to steal the components of the BioNexus device throughout the city. And all they need to complete it is the scientist who designed it and a suitable power source. Spidey follows the trail, faces off against Electro's co-conspirators, and has to put a stop to the starfish-masked criminal before he becomes too powerful. Damn, that costume looks great in this commercial. Get Jamie Foxx wearing that fit, wow. While the first game featured heavy hitters like Mysterio, Scorpion, Rhino, Venom, Lizard kinda, and a final boss rush with Carnage, Dr. Octopus, and Carnoctopus, Spider-Man 2 ups the ante with villains like Sandman, shocker, Lizard for real this time, not Beetle, he's just a cameo, Hammerhead, Electro is the final boss. See, this is where we're already struggling. They kind of blew their supervillain load on the first game, didn't they? I think even as a kid, I felt like this roster of enemies was a step down. Spider-Man sort of has a big 3 of main antagonists, and the first game already used 2 of them. I'm sure they held off on using Green Goblin intentionally because they were already working on the movie game over at Activision, while Vicarious handled this game in the interim. So without the Goblin, Spidey's a little bit light on evil masterminds. Sure, there are lesser known characters who could fit that bill, but they aren't as colorful or exciting as a boss fight, like Kingpin, Silvermane, Tombstone, Crime Master, you know, the organized mafia types who engage in more white-collar crimes on the surface and pay other people to do the blue-collar crimes. Those characters can be just as interesting, but maybe not necessarily in a PS1 video game where you want to punch cool enemies with really explosive powers. So I see why they'd go for someone like Electro, because he is technically pretty powerful, he has a cool name and a very interesting costume instead of just a suit and tie. The problem lies in the fact that Electro is not a boss-type bad guy. He's not smart enough to hatch huge schemes. He doesn't employ his own henchmen either. The vast majority of the time, he is a henchman to one of the other guys. He's a follower, not a leader. It's like making a Batman game where the main villain is Deadshot. Like, okay. I've also talked about this before, but I think Electro is just one of the weaker Spider-Man villains writing-wise. With any other Spidey rogue, I could tell you all kinds of in-depth information about their childhood upbringing, what led them to being a criminal, the depth of their personalities, and how they're each so different from each other, what kind of redeeming qualities they have, if any, their personal relationships outside of criminal activity, their nuanced opinions of Spider-Man and how those have grown over the years, and what each of their personal philosophies are for why they use their powers for evil instead of good. Electro is maybe the hardest character to do that with. He's really lacking in depth, and it's not his fault, he's fictional. I blame Marvel for just never really sitting down and trying to develop him any further than his debut, like they have with everyone else. He has the potential to be an interesting character with a realistic personality and motivations, but they just haven't really devoted the time to that like they have with all the rest of these baddies over the decades. I think this is why of all Spidey villains, he's the one that adaptations take the most creative liberties with. There's a lack of usable source material, so they tend to just fill in the blanks with whatever. And that's why Electro adaptations are extremely different from each other, while other characters tend to be a little bit more uniform. Want to make him a bullying victim pushed too far? Sure, why not? Want to do a kind of Invisible Man thing? Okay, fine. Make him a teenage girl, who cares? These are practically 2 separate characters, but no one cares because it's Electro. This all means that the next biggest thing this game has working against it is that Electro has cool powers and a cool costume, but is otherwise a really flat and unexciting main villain. I mean, Doc Ock was in the first game creating these super elaborate schemes to take over New York, frame Spider-Man, mass-produce evil symbiotes, trick the public into thinking he's a reformed hero, and lead a whole cabal of villains after Spider-Man as a distraction from his master plan. And Electro is just stealing a techno vest that makes him do lightning better. This also really lacks the same day in the life of Spider-Man vibe 2000 had. Something about the fact that you never see Peter Parker, his boss, his wife, or any of his friends just makes this one feel alienating. Having all these other touches to humanize him as a character were really cool, since most games tend to skip over that sort of thing just to get to the action. The story was really good at working in every aspect of Peter's life without also breaking the flow of the action. In this one, he never takes off the mask, never takes a break from being a superhero, never interacts with anyone that he knows personally, and they just don't show or tell you anything about his life outside of this particular adventure. That makes the story just feel more generic, because all of these staples of Spidey mythos are missing, and it's just a run-of-the-mill, go here, fight this, go here, fight the next guy kind of plot. This didn't even have to be a Spider-Man game. He feels mostly irrelevant to the things going on, because they don't affect him personally that much. We went from him being framed for a crime, saving his boss's life, and searching for his kidnapped wife, and so much Peter Parker angst, to just briefly interacting with this scientist lady we know nothing about. He's just on the job for this one, and that makes the stakes feel a lot lower for me. But in that sense, it doesn't feel like as much of a Spider-Man story if Spider-Man himself isn't all that important or invested. This game could have played out exactly the same if it was Daredevil or any other double-jumping street hero saving the day. It's very impersonal, so as a fan of the character, it doesn't feel as engaging. Then again, some could argue that it makes it just as much of a day in the life of Spider-Man as the other game. Sometimes he isn't all that connected to what's happening other than just needing to save lives and hit dangerous criminals in the face. But then, are those stories as exciting? Is Spider-Man not way less interesting if you take away the Peter Parker half of him? I don't know, but overall this game feels like a low-energy after-party. It just doesn't have the same kick to it. But I'll try not to hold that against the game. It's still a PS1 action combat game about punching and kicking and web-slinging. I'm going to keep that in mind. The story wasn't the main attraction of the first game. It just helped that it was so authentic to a typical Spidey comic, on top of having great levels and gameplay. But at the end of the day,
people want punching!
On that front, the gameplay receives a resounding, shoulder-shrugging, no complaints. From me, there aren't really any major additions, upgrades, or innovations over Spider-Man 2000. It plays exactly the same as the last one did, and that played extremely well for a PS1 game. Just like last time when recording the gameplay footage for this, I had my friend Jackson on the controls so his fresh perspective could help me think outside the box when critiquing this game. He's not much of a comic reader, nor has he played very many games older than the PS2, so I think his input is helpful for staying objective on how easy the game is to pick up and play. While Spider-Man 2000 was a breeze for him to play as a first-timer, this one is admittedly a bit more difficult. At least in terms of navigating levels and sometimes understanding what you need to do to progress. Combat is relatively unchanged, so that wasn't a struggle. They added electric and freeze webbing instead of fire webs, and those are just kind of novel. The electric webs kill robots faster, I suppose. But they don't factor in all that much. The old trusty Spidey armor appears here, just like once or twice. While the first game has very strong pacing and keeps you moving from location to location at a breakneck pace, with a very smooth flow between the levels, Enter Electro struggles to maintain that same momentum. The levels are a lot larger and more spread out, relying on you to actually explore around to find solutions at times, and they're sometimes kind of obtuse about where to go. I don't personally find any difficulty with all that since I've played this over a dozen times by now, and the weird placement of objectives is all memorized as second nature. But watching Jackson struggle with finding objectives in hectic and overstuffed levels, or not having proper guidance on how to progress through an area because of a lack of hints, did give me a chance to see that sometimes the basic level design aspect of this game isn't the strongest. It's not as intuitive and user-friendly as its predecessor. Like, this area in the office building where you have to beat up thugs and rescue hostages. This is incredibly familiar considering this scenario happened twice in the first game, but this time you're expected to use impact webbing to mulch these doors in the hallway. The game didn't provide any kind of hint for this, and Jackson's natural inclination was to assume that a locked door that you otherwise couldn't interact with must have just been purely decorative. So he ran around in circles for 15 minutes before I just told him to break the doors down. I think the first game was better at just letting you know what was expected of you in some situations. Not necessarily holding your hand, but just giving you a sense of what tools were at your disposal for interacting with the levels and the best way to move forward. I can't help but wonder if these segments of getting plunked down into a big area and just told to go find the objective yourself was a way to pad out the game time a little bit more, because otherwise these levels here are even shorter than the first games. You spent a lot of damn time in the sewers in that one. Here, you can complete almost every level in less than 10 minutes if you know where to go. So they try to make you savor some locations longer than others, and I can't say I like this approach as much. Huge maze-like levels with varied locations attached together that lead from one room to the next are now replaced with short vignettes where you drop in, find a couple of needles in a haystack, then get warped to the next zone without the same feeling of continuity between levels. I know there's a lot of boring, nuanced, analytical talk about game design. You probably want me to talk about 9/11 and how boss fights suck. We'll get there. The levels in the city no longer have the in-universe explanation for hidden draw distance of Doc Ock's symbiote fog stuff, so the sequel bathes it all in pure black shadow, which admittedly looks kind of weird and terrifying. I think they opted for more of a sunset golden hour lighting in these levels to make more of an excuse for these ultra-high contrast shadows being poured over the depths of the city, but somehow the effect and the lighting combines in a way that makes New York feel really lonely and creepy. It's just not as pleasant to look at as the colorful levels of the original, so I tend to try to get through them a lot faster because I'm not as inclined to explore these areas when they look so hollow. I do like that we're finally able to land on street level and explore a couple of sections on the ground, when that seemed unthinkable in the previous one. Two of those levels I mentioned earlier where you have to explore a lot more, put you on the ground to hunt down pockets of enemies or search for key items, and those are the ones that I find at least the most visually memorable from the outdoor sections, if only because the first game didn't have anything that looked like that. The interior sections are generally more linear, but aren't all that interesting. There's two big standouts. One being the biotech building that you have to infiltrate, full of automated security and one of the coolest climbing puzzles in a Spider-Man game, where you have to scale this huge vertical shaft full of traps and lasers. The other one I've always really loved was the museum level. It's short, but the middle segment is the other coolest climbing section, where you're trying to get to the top of this tall, prehistoric display while Electro is attacking from above. I just lament how this game really doesn't have much in the way of chase scenes through the city. There's like one. Yeah, there's one. Rather than you chasing down a villain or being chased by a pursuing enemy, you'll encounter some stuff where you have to stop or catch up to a runaway vehicle. The plane level is deceptively easy as long as you just keep jumping and spamming impact webbing at the obstacles. I had to do this one for Jackson because he was really struggling.
The plane is gonna blow if I don't clear a path for it.
Trying to catch up to the train while Sandman blocks your path is also a nice sequence. I wanted to say this game didn't have as many rad action set pieces as the first one, but I think it has just enough memorable stuff that I do look back on fondly. Now that I'm seeing it all again, I'm realizing that it at least throws some interesting stuff your way to keep things from getting too monotonous. Hey, a lot of memories in this spot. None of them are good, but they're there. Especially when Chameleon confessed his love for me here. That was weird. A huge portion of the game is spent chasing down leads and distantly watching suitcases be traded off in clandestine meetings between one or more figures dressed like a Ninja Turtle trying to blend into a crowd. Eventually, Spidey's confronted by one of these guys, and it's the 3D game debut of the Shocker. Soon to be a mainstay in Spidey video games as an easy first supervillain to beat before getting to the smarter ones. You can fight him one-on-one, but the easiest way to beat him is to web yank these crates down onto his head, which takes out a ton of his health on the lower difficulties. Next up is Sandman, who has a health bar but can't actually be defeated here, which is a fun detail because it reminds you how this character is technically unbeatable in the right environment. You get a rematch with him later at a construction site where you hose that hoser.
Get power washed, you sedimentary savage!
Good riddance.
As I pointed out a decade ago, this game really drops the ball with a fight that could have taken place in between these, but this was likely cut for whatever logistical reasons. You spend so long chasing down the guy in the black coat and find out he's actually the Beetle, who's kind of like an evil Iron Man with an insect motif. He appears as just a cameo and then bugs off without a proper battle, and I'll never let go of how disappointing that was as a youngster. But I have a feeling this was a victim of either limited memory on the disc, having to push the game out on a tight deadline, or just the inherent difficulty of programming an enemy that's meant to fly around in the air. Who knows? Hammerhead's boss is pretty bland, much like the character himself. The lizard one is neat. I like how he can actually follow you on the ceiling if you try to crawl away from him. You have to hit him with special pickups with a lizard antidote serum to weaken him enough to get some hits in. Oh, what's next? Electro fights you in a level that really reminds me of the 2007 Simpsons game, but he's locked down in a single spot and it's pretty easy to just spam projectiles at him. At least the final boss has a really cool setting and atmosphere, and it's fun that you can only hurt him by getting him to shock these generators that temporarily sap his zaps. Take a nap, sap! I'll say the bosses are also less interesting than the first game when it comes to variety. They don't have as many clever or unique gimmicks to mix things up. And as we've talked about, this roster of villains feels like the C-listers except for Sandman. On the topic of C-listers, the unlockable costumes lack something to be desired. A healthy amount of them are carried over from Spider-Man 2K, but some of the new additions are kind of bland. Like doing some of the Identity Crisis costumes is cool in theory, but I would have preferred Ricochet over Prodigy since that still maintains some Spidey theming and he had a cool jacket. I do like how you get a battle damage suit in the final boss that hilariously looks better than Beanox and Insomniac's attempts at the same concept. There's a new feature to pair any of the costumes with any of the unique perks from other costumes, but I feel like that just defeats the purpose of having the costumes have powers at all if you could just override that with whatever combination you wanted. One of the more memorable strengths of the original game was how well it steeped itself in Spidey's world, which is a world he shares with hundreds of other colorful costume characters, all with decades of history just as deep as his own. The story's scope and reach had an effect on the surrounding superhero community in New York, and we got to see how they all independently investigated or helped with the adventure while Spidey took the lead. It was a great way to introduce kids like myself to other Marvel characters and get a sense of their individual relationships with Spider-Man. This was a fully fleshed out world that he just existed in as a part of, without being the center of it. A wonderful, low-poly world where nearly every single man you encounter is voiced by either Darren Norris or D. Bradley Baker, and every woman on the planet is just Jennifer Hale. This leads us to two problems with Enter Electro. The first being that the incredibly small voice cast becomes a lot more apparent in this one because everyone sounds the bloody same, and two, the Marvel cameos in this one are pretty pathetic. In the main storyline, you encounter such classic Marvel characters along your journey as Beast from X-Men and... Yeah, that's it for the main story. At the very least, the challenge mode lets you hang out with more X-Men characters. Rogue and Professor X. Hey, it's my namesake! In all his PS1 glory. I do like how the challenge mode here is framed as Spidey training in the X-Men's danger room after the main story of the game has already ended. That's cool and all, but surely there was a way they could have appeared in the plot or helped out to some degree just for the fun of it. I mean, Beast just showing up out of nowhere to like kind of mansplain to you how to do Spider-Man stuff feels weird, and he comes off like a pretentious dick.
I noticed perchance your diurnal patrol and thought I would provide you with information of a practical and necessary nature.
Thanks for the show of interest, Beast. But I've been doing this for a while now. I think I'm okay.
Indeed. We shall see. Since you're so smart, why don't you try following me?
Why are you giving me this sarcastic shtick? What the fuck? What do you know about being Spider-Man? You're a fucking war criminal. One of my favorite scenes from the game is not technically in the game, and I had never seen it until a few months ago, as it was lost media for 24 years. After beating Electro, this lost cutscene depicts Thor, the god of thunder, showing up to check what all the electrical commotion was.
Spider-Man, surely thou doth not possess power enow to make the very heavens shake as they did?
Not me. He doth. I mean, or did.
Bantering with Spidey, and then destroying the BioNexus device, rendering it no longer a threat.
Oh, thanks!
It's really cool how this was finally rediscovered after all these years. I'm just left wondering now why it was cut in the first place.
Thanks for the cameo though, really.
This is a crucial cutscene for wrapping up the story and tying up loose ends. This is this game's equivalent to, like, this cutscene. As it is, the game's current ending is just the boss fight, and then immediately cutting to the next day in the epilogue. And now that I know what was missing in the middle, it's so much more obvious how incomplete that feels. But, like, why was this cut? I mean, maybe it was a technical issue with getting that many cutscenes onto the PS1 disc. There's a continuity error with his costume not being destroyed in this cutscene. I don't know. This cutscene doesn't show the towers, so I don't know if it's that. Oh yeah, that. Alright, this is one of the most obvious talking points about this game, and people expect you to bring it up every time you mention this one, but this game was released a month after the September 11th terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City. I'm sure you've heard of that event. Unless you're one of those TikTok children that might think that's just a meme and don't realize it actually happened, in which case I'm surprised you made it this far into a video this long without totally checking out. Electro scores a priceless diamond at a museum, which he can use to power the BioNexus device he stole and turn him into a lightning god. In the original version of the cutscene, Spidey gathers that Electro is going to the top of the towers with this line.
Where would you go to be on top of the world? I'm coming, Electro.
But in the final release, this line is missing, and the scene is re-edited to hide the pre-rendered towers in the establishing shot.
I think I might have an idea. I'm coming, Electro.
Then the actual level itself has been altered to hide the resemblance to the real location. This middle section must have been constructed as an anti-Philippe Petit countermeasure so he wouldn't die on their property if he pulled that whimsical shit a second time. To their credit, this level edit made it a lot harder to identify the building if you didn't already know what it was meant to be. As a kid, I didn't even think about this being some massive skyscraper. I just assumed it was a power plant outside of the city. Taking out that establishing shot really hides the scale. Like, I thought this building couldn't be more than like 5 stories tall. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, this cross-section being added does make the fight a little bit easier because you don't have to risk falling between the towers in the middle of combat. A lot of little edits pop up throughout the game like this, like removing Spidey's scream when he falls off a building.
Wonderful.
Changes to the credits, and one of the storyboards being removed from the game's extras. There's a great video that breaks down all the changes in more detail, and I'll just toss in a link so you can just go check that out, since it's probably the most comprehensive list on the topic. Did they crop Electro's health bar wrong? What is that line? Lastly, there's also a scene of an airplane exploding in the airfield section with the wreckage present in the following level, and both of those had to be cut. Man, talk about unlucky. You had an exploding airplane and the Twin Towers in your game slated to be released in late 2001? Ugh. It is completely obvious and understandable why they changed all this around. It would just be way too distracting. Though I think on the off chance that this game is ever remastered for a new release, maybe packaged with the first one, they should restore the original content back to how it was. The wound was way too fresh when this was released, but it's been a quarter of a century now. I think we ought to be a little bit more understanding of it now. Like, it just was bad timing. Spider-Man has a weird history with the Twin Towers because of his status as Manhattan's primary superhero. Look at Juggernaut just standing there. I bet he's just stifling laughter. Because of the sliding timeline, he already destroyed this same building a few months ago, and he was laughing so hard he almost pissed himself. You're a sick man, Kane. Actually, because of the sliding timeline, early Ditko era Spider-Man has to take place in like 2017 now, which I'm not sure how to feel about. In the grand scheme, these edits are still ultimately pretty minor and don't affect the overall experience of the game that much. The intended vision is still mostly preserved. They didn't have to cut an entire level or remove a boss fight or something like that, at least as far as I can tell. But that also means having these edits is not the reason that this game just feels kind of empty compared to its predecessor and its successor. I know it seems like there was a lot of negativity in this breakdown, but that's really just because the first game was so exceptional that this one had big shoes to fill as a direct follow-up. It's not a bad game at all, but I think there's a reason that this one isn't remembered as fondly or treated with as much reverence. It feels more like a competent DLC expansion than a full-on sequel, if I were to put it in modern-day terms. It doesn't shake things up, break the mold, or expand on the successes or failures of the first game in any substantial way. It's just more of it, and it's a little bit less exciting in pretty much every way. It's not contributing a whole lot in the way of evolving Spidey's gameplay, the story is kind of bland, and a lot of major draws of its predecessor are missing or not executed nearly as well. I know for some it's a hidden gem, or it's underrated, or not talked about enough, or whatever, but I can't bring myself to give it any of those same labels. Then again, I also can't really hate it either. Even if the final product is less than the sum of its parts, it's still a fun game, and it's nice to be in the Neversoft Spider-Man world just a little bit longer before the live-action movies took hold for the next few years. I'd kill for more comic book games to look as 90s as these games do, and it still feels like it could be another storyline canon to the comics rather than trying to adapt or change them. These games can very comfortably coexist with the source material. I think that's a treasure in itself. I mean, heck, the dev team for this one was small enough that they could make personalized credits for everyone. It's hard to be cynical about that.
Oh no!
Mostly.
Oh,
In spite of all of its shortcomings, which feel more numerous than I remembered, I definitely don't dislike Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro. I just think the game right before it is the definition of a tough act to follow, and this one being squarely just okay makes its flaws seem all the more glaring. That being said, it's still worth checking out for Spidey fans or fans of D. Bradley Baker flexing his range.
Looks like the freak wants to play.
I always get mad at YouTube for not putting my videos in the subscription box because people will comment, "Finally, Xavier uploads again after all these years," not knowing 3 other videos came out within the last month already. So maybe that stupid bell icon thing will help you remember I exist. If you want other ways to support the channel, you can always go hit up that Patreon for early videos and exclusive stuff because it's just $1. I'm not kidding, it's only $1. Isn't that cool? If just 5% of the people subscribe to me donated only $1 a month, I can make videos even faster and keep my house.
Oh! Oh no! 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 No!
Take a look in case you find something you like. And lastly, since this is a YouTube video and you probably play Fortnite, drop my creator code XavierGM next time you buy a silly dance or a cool character skin. Really helps me out. See you next time.